This is a... I expect all of you really know what the Ecrehous are. But I'll repeat it in case there's people who don't. It's a group of rocky islands halfway between Jersey and France to the northeast of Jersey. And this is a aerial photograph taken at high tide. And it shows Marmotier and I'll try this. Oh, that is Blanquille. This is Marmotier, and I don't know the names of those, but this is high water. At low water, all of these are connected with sand and shingle. The reason I'm showing you that is that Philippe Pinel lived here, and he had built himself, or rather he had repaired some stone huts which were there and were rather falling to pieces. I don't think either of those houses were there in his day. But Jersey fishermen have always used the Ecrehous as a base for local fishing. And also for gathering vrac and seaweed. Many of them lived for short periods there while they were doing the fishing, but the need to take their catches back to Jersey to be sold meant that nobody really settled down until Philippe Pinel arrived in 1848. He was born in St. John in 1820. And his family were all seafarers. His father used to do long voyages, and Philippe weren't with him. But he got fed up with that and decided to stick to local fishing. He's... Sorry about it. Yes, that's a picture of Philippe when he was quite a young man. But it's a posed picture in a photographic studio. And they've given him this extraordinary fish, which I'm sure he never caught. But however, it shows him quite young, which is good. Before moving to the Ecrehous, which he did in 1845, he married a lady from, also from St. John, called Jeanne Hammond, Dite de Mognon. But she was 12 years older than he, so they didn't have any children, which I'm not surprised about. No, she was 13 years older than he. It amazes me that she was even prepared to go to the Ecrehous, because it was very primitive conditions. A stone bed with dried seaweed for a mattress base and a pillow, a homemade oven, and water collected from the roof. This was reported by a French visitor, Mr. Charles Fremine, in 1884. They first lived on material, which didn't appear in the picture of the Ecrehous, because it's the biggest island, and there were already stone huts there, which had always been used by fishermen, and also there had once in medieval times been a monastery, well, a priory, where the monks had the job of lighting a fire to warm boats where the rocks were. And then Philippe moved to Marmotier for a bit and repaired a house there which belonged to a lady who sold grog to the fishermen. And then, after a short time, he moved to Blanquille, which is connected to Marmotier rather, by a long shingle bank which is called the Tai, and this is walkable except at high water. At Blanquille there were derelict huts which Philippe this house that you see first is wasn't there when Philippe was, but the huts beyond were part of his palace, and he had to. They were quite derelict, so he had to rebuild them, and he rebuilt 3 of them for himself. One to live in, one to keep hens and cockerels in, and one for the cistern of rainwater collected off the roofs. He and Jeanne also managed to have a small garden in front of the huts where they grew cabbages and a few potatoes. Yeah, that's. You can see that they're still looking fairly derelict, even when he was there. The trouble was that the shingle bank was not securely on rock, and so it moved about with the high waters, and also occasionally would be flooded. But Philippe didn't seem to mind, and the huts remained standing somehow. He had a small dog and a pet thrush which he kept in a cage outside. That's a view from the other side, and this is a view of him standing outside his front door, and you can see where the cabbages were being grown. But I can't see the thrush's cage at all. By 1860, Philippe was beginning to call himself King of the Ecrehous during many drinking sessions with his mates. He was a great drinker, especially liking cognac. And then in 1863, Mr. Philippe Nicole, Deputy of Trinity, with Mr. Noel and a Mr. Foote, plus several Jersey fishermen, arrived with an iron crown and a great deal of liquor, mostly provided by Mr. Foote. They all stayed for 3 days, during which they had a crowning ceremony, sang many songs, and drank so much that they were all blotto, according to one of the party. There's a letter from a lady whose father knew Pinel and reported that he was a ruffian. He was known as a great drinker and was reported to have behaved badly towards his wife. There was a Mrs. Alice Newbegin, whose letter I read. She had some uncles who went to the Ecrehous and found the poor wife alone and with no food, because Philippe had gone to Jersey with his mates for a drinking session. She took the opportunity to come back to Jersey with the uncles and left the Ecrehous for good. She is reported to have shown friends in Jersey the injuries she had sustained from Philippe. She died in 1884, aged 76, in Trinity. When the king discovered that she had gone, he seemed unconcerned. Later on, he merely said that if anyone would bring him another wife, he would be pleased. But he wanted a younger one. But he certainly was not all bad, because in 1873 a Norwegian vessel was wrecked, and 18 crew members were thrown out onto the Ecrehous reef. 6 of them were rescued by Messrs. Blampied and Whitley, but the remaining 12 were taken in by the Pinels, who were later awarded £5 and a commendation from the RNLI. Philippe was involved in a court case against him for grossly insulting a Mr. Bertram, who had gone to the Ecrehous to investigate and stop smuggling. Philippe had accused the Mr. Bertram of stealing a cask of wine, but on one occasion Philippe was reported to have towed such a cask to Jersey to hand it over to the AMPO. But so there was obviously had been smuggling, and it's very difficult to tell whether Philippe was on the side of the authorities or not. He was fined £1 or 4 days imprisonment by the court. Philippe made lobster pots and other basket work in order to make some money, and this led to the exploit for which he's best remembered. He made a magnificent 3-story basket, which he sent to Queen Victoria as a present from one monarch to another. The basket was reputed to have been filled with different sorts of fish, but I have my doubts about that, because I think by the time it got to Queen Victoria, the fish would have been very stinky. It was sent with the help of Mr. R.R. Lempriere, who was the Seigneur of Roselle at the time, and also the Lieutenant Governor. Queen Victoria sent a letter to Philippe thanking him, and a coat, which was what she called the Sunday suit of a wealthy seaman. These were taken to the Ecrehous by the governor and presented to Philippe there, and the letter was framed and hung in his palace by a Miss Ewart, who I think must have been the daughter of the governor. 6 of them were rescued. Oh yes, well, Philippe must have thought that he was on to a good thing, because he then made another basket. This is a photograph of Philippe sitting on his boat, which was called the John, outside his huts, and you can see his little dog there, but I can't see any thrush's cage. John was his younger brother, and he was obviously very fond of John, because he called his boat John, and he also announced at one point that John would be his heir to the throne. And he thought he was on to a good thing, so he made a second basket to send to Princess Beatrice, and this was exhibited in St. Helier Market, and at one time, where Philippe charged people 1 shilling to look at it. That's him. That's the coat which Queen Victoria sent him. And that may have been the thrush's cage. I'm not sure.
Yes.
However, Princess Beatrice didn't send him anything in return. Now there he is standing in the market, or in St. Helier somewhere, with the basket, which is actually Princess Beatrice's basket, not the one that he sent to Queen Victoria. By this time, the King of the Ecrehous had become what you might call a tourist attraction. There's a Mr. E.T. Nicol who went on an excursion, and there were excursions arranged to go to the Ecrehous. where he wrote that he considered it a great privilege to have met this august old fisherman. But by then, Philippe was beginning to suffer from rheumatism, and he could no longer make his baskets. And they were made, incidentally, out of dried seaweed, which seems extraordinary to me, that seaweed could be made strong enough to do that. He actually told one of his fisherman friends that he didn't know if he would last another winter. Also, his pet thrush and his pet dog had both died, so he was on his own completely. In December 1896, that's him sitting, again, it's a posed photograph with Princess Beatrice's basket. In December 1896, some fishermen found Philippe very ill indeed, and they reported this to the Connétable of St. Martin, because the Ecrehous has always been part of the parish of St. Martin, and every year all the officials from St. Martin go there and have a party, I think, just to make sure that the Ecrehous still belongs to them. Anyway, the Connétable arranged for Philippe, much to his disgust, to be brought to Jersey and to go to the General Hospital. And on 17th of December 1896, Philippe died. And there's a Baron Marc de Villers de Tenage who wrote a sort of biography of various kings, said, he remarked that his light, where was I? I've forgotten, I've lost him. Oh, his light was slowly extinguished through lack of oil, if not of whiskey. And anyway, Philippe's hut and others had been photographed by Oulis in 1882, and they were some of the first photographs taken of the Ecrehous. He was said to have sold his palace to Mr. R.R. Lempriere, Seigneur of Roselle, in 1895. Also, he was said to have charged 1 penny a peek to people to look at him. Yes, I've said that he declared his brother John heir to the throne. Anyway, Philippe actually had his boat registered, the John, at one point, and he had a permit to fish, but the boat, the port given in the registration was Roselle. But then, after a while, in 1882, this permit was cancelled, and the boat was written down as being at the Ecrehous rocks and not used for fishing. But this fact made the last positive thing which Pinel's residence at the Ecrehous gave us, because when France brought a case to the International Court of Justice in The Hague, not long after the war, claiming that both the Ecrehous and the Minkies should belong to France, Pinel's residence and his boat were used as part of the evidence given by the UK to establish that the Ecrehous had always been part of Jersey and never part of France. And the case, much to the chagrin of the French, they wanted the fishing rights, which was really why they brought the case in the first place. But the Ecrehous has always been part of Jersey and part of St. Martin's parish, and long may it remain so. now there are many more houses there than there were. And the interesting thing about the shingle bank on which he built his house is that there is nothing left of the houses there at all. And I think it's partly because the sea has risen and there are more, the high tides cover it much more often, and everything has been washed away. But I remember the last time I was there, I did find a little bit of parsley growing, and I wondered whether that was perhaps self-seeded remnant of the garden that he had. I think I've told you everything I know. Yes. And of course Matriel, where he first lived, there was a big archaeological dig which found all the evidence for the priory and for Neolithic occupation there as well. But now, and there was a well on Matriel, but there's never been any well or way of getting water except by catching it from the roofs on any of the other islands. And I'd like to say that there's a lady here whose husband is it? Who's great.
My husband's partner.
Your husband's
Just partner. It's his great grandfather, and there's also a cousin in the room as well. Like to show yourself?
His great
grandfather
was Philippe Pinel. So I don't know how he did that though when Philippe didn't have any children.
Well,
However, maybe it's from his brother John, perhaps. Yes. There we are then. Anyway, I'll go back and show you the pictures of the... That's Princess Beatrice's basket. That's the blue coat from Victoria.
okay.
That's him sitting on his boat with his blue coat and his small dog beside him. And that's him just standing with his cabbages. And that's the view of the huts, which I don't think that end house can have been there when he was living there. And this is the view of the huts again that he lived in. And that's from the other side. And again, that modern looking house was certainly not there when he was. And that's him as a young man. And there he is and you can see that, because that's a modern day photograph, that there is nothing left on the shingle bank between the two rocks of Blanquille. Nothing left of his house at all. So that's it, I think.
Should we put the lights on now? Can somebody put a few lights on at the back, please? Thank you, Neil. Right, thank you very much, Mary. Questions? Oh dear.
I just want to bring you the ferry.
Oh yes.
Yes, I don't know, I couldn't find out.
I thought I tried to research that.
Yes, you tried to, and
Yes.
we couldn't find out.
No. I think I tried to research whether he was buried with his wife.
Yes,
And I can't remember.
because she died in Trinity.
But if he died in the general hospital, well, yeah.
Yes.
Is there any clue as to why he decided to live there in the first place? Is it
No,
just
only
for the
that the only thing I can think is that he did rent a cottage in near Bouley Bay, didn't he, at one time? But it was only rented, and I think he didn't have a home in Jersey, and so when he started fishing, local fishing, he rather liked the look of the Ecrehous and just decided to settle there.
Thank you.
But he must have had, I presume, his brother bringing him out supplies, and all the other fishermen obviously brought him supplies too.
At the back.
Mary, you were saying that he'd got a small garden there, but
Yeah.
surely he couldn't have grown very much. I mean, there can't be much soil in.
No, there's very little indeed, but what was his name? Another, I do know of a fisherman of when I was first going there, Arthur Bale, I think his name was, who managed to grow some potatoes outside his modern house on Blomfield. So there must somehow have been enough soil brought in or manufactured to grow his potatoes.
Or perhaps they were racking it,
Yes.
racking the sand to bulk it up.
Yes, he certainly made money by collecting rack and drying it. So perhaps he was using that. Yeah.
Actually, we used to bring lake soil.
Did you?
Yeah.
Ah, well, there you are, yes. I think perhaps Arthur Bale must have taken some soil. Yeah.
Any more questions?
The third picture up. You go back up through.
The third from the front.
Yeah, please no, not that one.
One,
Not
two.
that one. Next
Right.
one.
that one.
No, next one.
That one.
Is that washing or is that fish drying?
What? This at the front. Looks like a sheep to me. Oh, hanging out. Probably his combinations. Oh, they don't look like fish, do they?
Pretty big fish.
100 years ago, their condoms were 6 foot long.
Yeah, I know, but look, there's a pair of trousers.
I'm sure he must have caught congers, mustn't he? Yeah. And what he, I don't know what he fed his hens on. Somebody must have brought him corn to feed his hens.
There's someone who got through the occupation fed their hens on small crabs, baby crabs.
Oh,
Gosh, that would have given me eggs. A bit fishy.
May I ask, are we looking at the photographs taken by Mr. Ulis?
well, I'm not sure that this one isn't one taken by Mr. Rulis. I think it is one of those, at least one of the ones of the are by Mr. Rulis. Might be that one, or that one. But that is after Philippe's time, I think, because you can see there's no barrel, and there's none of the stuff that was in front when he was living there.
I take it this is vrac, is it?
Yes.
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 Should we imagine that the rectangle on the extreme left is an extension?
Oh, yes, it's difficult. It's not very clear, is it?
No, it looks like it might be an add-on.
Yeah.
Sort of a wooden hut.
He certainly used 3 huts, which he'd rebuilt himself, so he must have been not only a very handy man, but a strong man too, because building huts out of granite blocks is not an easy task.
Presumably, when they fell down or were knocked down, presumably some of that stone has been used to rebuild other buildings.
Yes, it could have been, yes. Because of
And the
course...
mortar wouldn't have been particularly stable, would it?
No, absolutely.
Unless he burnt his oyster shells for the money.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes, he was certainly must have been very much a handyman and a very capable man too.
Right, any more comments?
Just one concerning the comment about rat in the foreground. I don't think this is rat.
No.
Swedish green mallow.
Right.
Oh,
Yes,
possibly, yes.
because it's rather random, isn't it? Anything else?
Can you read it?
No? Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mary.